Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure everybody's having a fantastic afternoon, enjoying Workflow Con. So we are super happy to have you here today for Bridging the Gap. This is a large firm track, so anxious to get us started. We'll let a couple of folks jump in, and I'll get started here in just a minute. Um, I'm coming to you from Cleveland, Ohio. Awesome. Fantastic. Well, we can go ahead and get started. This is a really incredibly important topic on workflows. And so I took some time to build a deck to share with everybody today on just really bridging the gap for transparency. It is so important when it's either just one person, two people, three people trying to understand where the work is throughout an organization, or if you're in a large firm. And large firms tend to have more complexities, clearly, because there's more individuals that have to understand where work is, what state it's in, what things are open and waiting for. And it's going to be really important to understand where we can have some of those hiccups. So I am Deborah Defer. Let me see if I can get the slides to move forward. This is designed for 20 employees or larger. This track is. So we're excited to have you here today. Like I said, I am Deborah Defer. I am a director of CAAS Consulting at Woodard. What we do is we come into large firms and help them build out their client advisory practices. I am certified in QuickBooks Online. I am a pro advisor. I've been a top 10 pro advisor, top 100 pro advisor. But quite honestly, I'm just a truly passionate about CAAS. I'm a large influencer and I am a total technology nerd. And Lisa, I love it. Happy Hump Day. That is one of my favorite commercials. Thanks for sharing. So on today's agenda, we're going to talk, I'm welcoming you. We're going to talk about the current state analysis of where we were, where we are, where we should be heading, why transparent workflows are so critical, the benefits of them, the strategies behind bridging the gap between groups of people and bringing them together to understand why we need good workflows, transparent workflows, optimal timing for an implementation. We all have experienced, I am sure, at least 99.9% of us, some type of implementation with technology. I'd be remiss to think that if you're in CAAS that you haven't touched tech at all. And we'll talk about roles and responsibilities. You do have a chat in the inside the session, so feel free to put questions up there. I'm gonna check it every once in a while, and I have backstage folks that are really able to help me, and I really appreciate all of them. So let's talk about the current state, right? So if we talk about historical engagements, especially before we moved to the cloud, right? We had on-premise, a lot of on-premise technology installations, right? And it was really hard to work remotely. COVID hit, it changed our lives forever. And there's some good that came out of it. We were able to be nimble and shift and be able to work remotely, right? And so the biggest thing that we see happening is that I just remember all the big folders, right, sitting on desks. And I was in a 2-story building when I was practicing. I was with a regional firm, and then BDO acquired us in January of 2015. But when I was at the regional firm, we were in 2 floors, and we had folders, right? And we had yellow pieces of paper on the top of them on which type of tax return it was. And when we were doing CAAS back then, we called it Entrepreneurial Services Group. So this is going back 15, 20 years ago. And yeah, I started at a really young age. I'm going to defy the age law. So I would have to run up and down the stairs, right? We did have an elevator, but you'd run up, you'd find out what state the tax return is. You could try to log in to see, when it was getting ready to be e-filed. But the tax folks were always coming down to find out, where we were with our month end close, our annual close, was the payroll done? Did the W-2s get finalized? Were the 1099s filed? When we talk about that whole year end process. And it was a nightmare. It was a lot of time and a lot of inefficiencies. And trying to track down that information was difficult. And so, way back when we used ProFX engagement, so we could look in the binders to see work papers and support and things that were there. But transitioning and moving to the cloud has made it way more transparent and effective and efficient for us to be able to find out where the data is, what status it's in, and who we're waiting on, right? And so these workflows and these the gaps that we find in them lead to tons of delays, miscommunications, and a lot of inefficiencies. And it's still happening today, right? I'm working with several firms, and I went into one firm, and we had to meet ahead of time. And I looked in the background, and her desk was just piles, right? Piles and piles and piles of folders and paper. And it just was like, oh, make me sick to my stomach. Like, I got to help you. We got to get all this stuff. We got to move to paperless. We have to make sure that it's not just stuck on somebody's desk. Things get lost. And so we really want to make sure that we are know where the data is and set it up in a logical order that other folks can find it and they know where the information is at any given time. Okay, so we know the pain points, right? We have miscommunication, there's errors. It's truly a lack of clarity, and we miss deadlines, and we have increased inconsistencies with instructions. If we think about it, I like to talk a lot about the 3 Ps. We have policies, we have processes, and we have procedures. And if we can follow the 3 Ps, then we can avoid many of these pain points, right? Because when we have a policy, it's a written documentation, it holds people accountable. We know what the consequences are if we don't follow a policy. And then we have procedures, and these procedures are really what it is that we're supposed to be getting done. And so then, in order to get those things done, we have to have activities or tasks underneath, right? And we call those the procedures, right? So you have policy, process, and procedures. And so the process and the procedures are what we find in workflows. We have a main item that needs to be done, whether it is a bank reconciliation, right? For example, and then we add how do we do the bank rec? We got to go out and get the bank statement. We got to open up the general ledger package. We have to have the login, whatever it is that we're doing as far as those activities underneath that process or that task gives us clear transparency when we build these workflows. And so these pain points can be avoided when we have those things laid out in a very understandable, very well articulated order to completing them. There's so many inefficiencies and delays when we all aren't dancing to the beat of the same drum. If we have stuff sitting on this person's desk or in this filing cabinet or at this person's house, when you can't find things, one person can become that bottleneck. We have redundancies where it's put down pickup constantly. It slows us down. We have a reduction in the overall productivity of our engagements. So we want to avoid those types of pain points. The other problem that we run into is we have inconsistent client service. So I may be out a day and somebody else has to step into my role. And without clear, concise documentation of these processes, the client isn't going to get the same results. And there's no standardization, right? And we know the biggest enemy of processes is the lack of standardization. It's a horrible enemy. And so it affects the quality. It negatively impacts the what I would call the client journey, how they're experiencing what we're trying to provide for them. We're in accounting. We're a service-based industry. We're here to provide support for our clients, right? I know that's why I went into accounting. I mean, I love numbers, but I really like people. And so I want to serve them. And I don't want them to have a horrible experience. And if we don't have clear, concise workflows, it's a problem. And it's a lot of pain. And we lose engagements over it. Folks get frustrated, right? It lowers the morale. Think about it. Think about your first day when you started in your employment. You have to do all this training to get suited up for what the firm has, independence training, and how do you use the different tools, and perhaps certifications with Bill or QBO or Xero or Sage Intech. You have to do all of these things, but then you're handed a client and client work, and it's like, okay, what do I do? And so if we don't have those clear, concise steps, right? There's confusion. We don't know who's responsible for what. And people get frustrated. Then you get low employee morale, and then we lose the client and we have disengagement. And I always ask folks, please put yourself in a brand new person's shoes. Let them sit in a seat and be able to go to a central location where they can find documentation. Hey, I'm a big fan of using Lucidchart and really mapping out like a nice, cool decision tree, because then I can build my workflows off of that, right? Great example would be like client onboarding. Have you sent the engagement letter or the statement of work? Has it been signed? Did you receive it? And you have decisions that come along with that, because then once you get it, you make sure that everything is appropriately provisioned. You have to turn on the technology for the client. And all of these things can be built into a workflow. And what is even more important is that there's accountability behind it, right? Because we know who's supposed to do what when we build out these workflows using decision trees and then using a piece of technology, like, for example, Financial Sense. It's really difficult to hold people accountable or to report on their aptitudes of completing things when we don't have that transparency, because we can't track the progress. We can go ask an individual, but then that takes more time. You got to pick up the phone, or you got to get up off your desk. You got to go walk over and talk to them. Maybe they're a remote employee. You can't get a hold of them. They're on other calls. Like I can go over like all the things that you run into, and you just want to whack your head against a brick wall. And so we want to make sure that we have accurate information, that everybody that's on an engagement or that would have a touch point to that engagement is provided accurate status information. The stakeholders are what's matter, because they're the ones that are going to be providing that deliverable to the end client, right? So why? Transparent workflows are critical, and I put critical in caps because we have to ensure alignment between the departments. We have to minimize these errors. We have to improve client service delivery, enhancing collaboration, holding folks accountable across all business lines, right? Because, we could be doing audit readiness for a client, right? Like if it's a CAAS engagement and I'm doing the monthly accounting work, and there's another firm that is actually doing their audit. Well, if if I don't have my team, maybe I'm a director and I'm reviewing the work, and I don't have a team that understands and knows a full cycle of a client and the whole cycle of getting ready for an audit, we're not going to look very good to that other firm. And our reputation is really important because we do have to collaborate, and accountants are fantastic at collaborating. And so, really understanding where information is going to benefit everybody, whether it's external to the client, external to another accounting firm. If you're doing, audit readiness, getting them ready for another firm to audit, especially when we're doing the CAAS work internally. And we certainly want to minimize the errors, right? And so we have to look at the broader picture on who is going to be affected by this work and this deliverable, and what can we do to make it an incredibly great experience for them. These are some of the critical mishaps, and I kind of like to tell stories, when I'm going through these things. And you know, I drove rescue squad for a living long time ago, and when I interviewed for public accounting, they asked me how I handled stress, and I said, "Well, have you ever had to triage three bodies laying on the ground and decide who you were going to work on first because maybe one of the other people weren't going to make it, and you had to decide which was the most important to work on?" That's stressful. But we also have deadlines. So, yeah, deadlines are going to be there tomorrow. But when we miss deadlines and we miss deliverables, we are not providing quality service for our clients. Tasks can fall out so easily through the cracks. And when we've missed these deadlines and we've failed on commitments, right? You People are not happy. I think about I was talking to somebody about a week and a half or so ago, and she used to work with somebody that would like give her all the credit card information in an Excel spreadsheet very timely by the third or the fourth. Every time that the month was closing, she could go in, she could get the information into the system and get the reports ready. This was a nonprofit client of hers. And then the person that she worked with that was so good at following up with her, because the expectations were set, they had their processes in place, right? The workflow was working very well. A new person comes in and the expectations weren't apparently set correctly, or the training, maybe the person that left didn't do a good job of training the new person, but now she's really struggling, and she's 3 or 4 months behind on credit card reconciliations because this person that took this position isn't giving her what she needs, right? So she's missing her deadlines, right? She's failing from a commitment level to the nonprofit board who wants to be looking at these reports, and they don't have complete information. And it all happened because workflows and processes aren't being followed. And if we don't spend the time to really train our clients, communicate with our clients, set those expectations with our clients, we could really do a disservice to our firms and to our clients. And then what you can see happening is that you can have duplication of work too, right? If you don't have a good workflow, you might have another team member that didn't know you were already working on the bank recs and go in and see that they're partway done and send another email to the client to ask questions when you had already asked those same questions. And so this critical component of communication within our workflows is is critical. For a lack of better words, I should pull up a bunch of synonyms and be able to pull from them. But then what also happens then is we have an inadequate oversight, right? We have increased risk for error, and the quality of the work is not good. And so people get really frustrated, right? Again, it all stems down to standardization and documentation of these processes and leveraging technology to be able to do some of these things, because you can automate. You can set up certain tasks to be done, and when that bank statement comes and it's the client's already communicated, that task can be closed and it's automated. And then you can move on and do the reconciliation, and when the reconciliation's done, that task can be closed and it'll be automated, and it will go all the way through the whole process so that you can complete it in a very effective way, in a very timely way. It produces a larger ROI on your engagement, and everybody's happy because at any point or time, tax, the director, they can log into a cloud-based workflow and be able to see where the progress is, how far you've completed, what's still left to be done, right? And so we want to make sure that we're very organized with our tasks, that we monitor them, we make sure the status of the overall project is being managed properly, and then we don't have these mishaps. You know, client dissatisfaction, number one, it causes so much time in the whip because you're running constant interference, and it negatively affects the way the client trusts you and their satisfaction, and it potentially could lead to losing the business. And none of us want to work on bad clients, right? We've all had some type of experience on working with good clients and bad clients. I don't have to go into explanation on those. But every client deserves to be a good client out of the starting gate, right? We're going to trust them 100% of the time until they give us a reason not to. But if we equip them with these types of tools and we have our house in order, right? That we're actually doing our task, we've standardized. And don't misunderstand me, I like to follow the 80-20 rule. And what I mean by that is 80% of our clients, we are going to wholeheartedly be able to standardize, keep them in the same workflow process, chronologically, client onboarding, the technology onboarding, the standard technology stack that we're leveraging. 80% of the clients are going to follow that. But I understand that there are some nuances. So 20% of the time and 20% of the clients are going to fall outside that standardization. And we do have to tweak what we're doing on occasion. I am not saying you want to be a jack of all trades and mistress of none and not do any standardization and any processes, because you're going to be all over the place and we're going to be back to where we started and it's going to be a miserable experience. What I'm saying is you can give yourself a little cushion. So following that 80-20 rule, you can accomplish a great deal of efficiencies and higher ROIs with these clients when you follow that. The other point that I want to make with that 20% is that the economics on those engagements should look significantly different than what you see in your 80%. Because when you standardized, right, you're able to do, it's a rinse and repeat. You can do more with less. We think about how AI has affected us and will continue to affect us. And currently, the average numbers that I see with these engagements prior to having a really good workflow and having good processes and having a standard technology stack, you're looking at, $180,000 to $225,000 of revenue per employee in a CAAS department. When we leverage AI and we leverage tools like Financial Sense and we develop these workflows and processes, we can absolutely get that number well up over $350,000 revenue per employee, because we're able to do more in less time, and we don't change the economics on the engagement. We just get better on the engagement. The client gets their information quicker. They find that more valuable because they can make better decisions because you're being proactive and not reactive. So keep those things in mind as we talk about transparent workflows, because it affects the entire engagement, from pricing to client satisfaction to employee satisfaction. And so the benefits, right? This all goes together, right? A benefit of a transparent workflow is we do have improved communications and visibility across the departments. We have now streamlined our processes, leading to better resource allocation. That's another area that we could probably talk about for the next 10 days nonstop, because less people are graduating in the accounting profession. We have, I think the last time I read, about anywhere from 39 to 42% of partners will be retiring in the next 10 years. I mean, it's getting narrower and narrower on our ability to have additional resources. And that's why it's important that we leverage technology. So we gotta really adopt the cloud, the technology, AI, and use it appropriately to make it effective, efficient, and good quality for our clients. So by having these transparent workflows, we do have a better project tracking. We are allowing for timely decisions and interventions, right? Because historically, when we would talk about having a client engagement, and I'm not a big fan of the word bookkeeper. I like to call it pre-accounting. I feel like that so much of technology can fill in all those transactional day-to-day stuff, and that we as accountants can then start doing the accounting once we get the pre-accounting into the system. But everything was so reactive. When I think about my first 2 years in public accounting, I was preparing financial statements 2 weeks after the month closed. Yeah, I could look to do better forecasting and look into the future to do some strategic planning with the client, but I wasn't aware when they were running low on money unless they called me up and they weren't going to make their payroll and they needed to figure out what had to be moved around. Now, with things in the cloud and knowing that I'm on top of it, I have my workflows already in place. I know before the client knows that they're going to run into a problem leveraging these types of tools. So it's really important to understand those items, that we don't want to be reactive. We want to be proactive in helping our clients. So here's some of the missed benefits, and I'm sure you all are really understanding that there's a lot of overlap between what those pay points are, why it's so critical, and what some of these missed benefits are. And so they intersect across the board. And we want improved collaboration. Without a workflow, without that transparency, team members don't know where things are, and it hinders their effectiveness and their collaboration. And then we get into, you know, pointing fingers at one another, right? Like, well, no, you had it, or you did it, or it's no, we don't want to have conflicts like that. And so we want to improve the collaboration where we can just open it up, look at the workflow and go, oh, yep, Sue's at that point. I know that she's got 2 more things to complete before I can pick it up and review it. Like, that's such a good feeling, right? And we can solve problems faster. These resolutions, we don't, we when we don't have visibility and we have bottlenecks, it's much harder to identify and resolve these delays. Why are things being delayed? And then we have enhanced accountability. And so I find it really interesting as I work with firms and they roll out these workflows. And, this is so important. CAAS is different than tax and different than audit, significantly different. And so there's different tools that we should be leveraging in a CAAS group versus what tax is using versus what audit is using, because the way we do the work is much different. And so I always encourage firms, I understand that you have to have the same practice management system because everybody's time has to go in practice management, and you have to produce the invoices out of practice management, and you follow your accounts receivable out of practice management, and on and on and on and on, right? But there, some of these workflow tools you can integrate or use middleware to bring time. So if you're leveraging financial sense, your time can be in there, and you don't have to enter time in financial sense and in a practice management system. You could be entering it there and have a bot that pulls the time from financial sense and puts it into your practice management system. Tax doesn't need that. Audit doesn't need that. So we have to be flexible when we're building out these workflows and work as a holistic firm, and not try to stay in silos, but understand that there's going to be tools that we use in different business lines because it's more effective. Then we can use accountability, right? We don't want to miss those benefits. So we enhance the accountability. We can have clear ownership, right, of the task, and it holds people accountable. So when people are going through their reviews and they're getting raises, and we come to the year-end reviews, we have a much better way of tracking when people have completed and they're staying up with their tasks, and it's very visible and it's very transparent and it's very noticeable that we can continue to see where the work is, making sure, if I'm a reviewer or a director and I have a team member that really can't get through the task and they're struggling, that's a learning opportunity. That's time where I can sit down and train that person if they're struggling. But without having that clear transparency, I wouldn't know unless that person came to tell me or until we've missed the deadline. And also the whole point of optimal resource allocation, right? I said earlier, we got less people graduating in accounting, or staying in the profession, partners retiring. And so we need to leverage this technology so that we can be more effective when we don't waste time running around trying to figure out where all the work is. And then clearly data, well, data's king, right? Cash is king, data's king. We can make data-driven decisions. We have that transparency now. We don't have it restricted. We can really dive into what needs to be done rather than being limited and not having strategic growth opportunities because we aren't using really good workflows. So we talk about strategies to bridging the gap, right? How do we bridge this gap? So implementing integrated workflows, right, with management tools. I just talked about that a minute ago. Having middleware when you're using a workflow tool or practice management. Establishing centralized communication platforms. That's absolutely huge because if somebody's out of the office, you want to be able to go in and look at the string of emails, right, within that given client engagement. And so if you can have Outlook connected to the workflows, oh my gosh, what an eye opener. So if I take a week off and somebody else has to roll in, they can clearly see what's been communicated with the client. It's fantastic. And then we've got our standard procedures and for the client engagement, and we have constant status updates, right? And so collaboration is absolutely the key. I see Charlene's making a comment in the Q&A, and you do have to pay attention to it. You absolutely, it's so important. When we have a lack of strategy, right? When we don't have it laid out clearly, strategically, what we're trying to accomplish, this is what happens. We get inconsistent processes, right? Workflows can be fragmented, be all over the place. People are confused, inefficient. We don't have defined roles and responsibilities. It makes it hard. We can't hold people accountable. We're misaligned on our goals and our priorities. And we all know that if we're misaligned, we're not all going the same direction, and not everybody's got the same outcome, right? The light at the end of the tunnel. And then we do create bottlenecks, and we have to have that strategic planning. It's absolutely critical to breaking down roadblocks for us. Inadequate communication and training. At Woodard, we have trademarked this it's the 7 ideals of a practice, right? And so the three, in my opinion, most critical pieces of an ideal practice is your people, your processes, and your technology. The other 4 items in our 7 ideals that we've trademarked, they fit into it. But if you aren't spot on with your people, processes, and technology, you're not going to be successful at rolling out a practice. And so we really want to strategize and have a really clear, concise vision, mission, purpose on what we're doing as an organization, and we build everything around it. When is it optimal to implement, right? Well, I'm a firm believer of, like annual planning cycles for strategic review, quarterly, end of the month. You got to be really sensitive to deadlines, clearly. We have to align the technology upgrades and processes. Sometimes it does have to be re engineered. I am a firm believer of piloting a smaller set of clients first to make sure we have our go or no go. I really like to document as we go through. I love to use what I call as a pilot and establish sandboxes, making sure that we're dotting our I's and we're crossing our T's. Again, here's that word again, collaboration. They say that you have to say something 7 times for somebody to remember. So we'll keep using that word, collaborate and collaboration. And it's coordinating resource management tools, right? There's having resource management and task management and skill sets aligned are critical for an incredibly great client journey. If it's inappropriate timing, right? If we don't plan it out correctly, and we do it like during peak work projects, like busy season, right in the middle of tax season, it can be very disruptive and it will lead to delays and people do get stressed. And we do not want to do that. Or in the middle of another project, right? We don't want to do things all at once, right? I always chasing the next shiny object. And when I was at BDO with my team, they would always got to pull back the reins on me a little bit because I was so eager to try new things. And I love tech. So I'm a tech nerd. I said that earlier. And so it's really important that you've completed a pilot, you've gotten the buy-in of the entire team before you step to the next phase, right? And we want to make sure that we're adequately training and preparing, because if we roll out a workflow for our CAAS department, but we don't give some type of training to the tax team where they can get in and see the status of things, read only. They don't have to be working in the workflow, but if they can have read only and understand the status, everybody's going to be happy and you're going to get better adoption and you're going to have less errors. But if you don't do adequate training and preparation, you're going to run into hiccups. And I'm always a believer of adding somebody on the team that typically is a naysayer that will really challenge every step of the way, because a lot of good comes from that. Sometimes it's hard to deal with the naysayers, but a lot of good can come from that. So understanding the current pain points, why are we implementing a workflow? What is the purpose of it? We're trying to gain efficiencies. We don't want to continue to have to cause problems between the different business lines or the different folks in our department. We want to know where the work is at all times. And then the other thing is, if you're doing any type of realignment or restructuring business lines, organizational chart, people's roles and responsibilities, rolling out a new workflow right at that point or time can be really frustrating, because you can't get full adoption when you have all these moving pieces. So it's important to put together a project plan and really lay it out step by step by step in a good project plan, knowing, having milestones and understanding when you are going to hit those milestones, what you expect to be completed when, and when the official rollout is after you've completed a pilot. You learn a ton from a pilot, and it will really help build a project plan. Developing roles and responsibilities, we want to make sure that we designate department leads over the implementation and oversight. We call them SMEs, subject matter experts. We want people to raise their hand and ensure that everybody is clear on the roles and that we've set clear expectations. Again, collaboration, communication. And we want to regularly review and update workflow processes too to reflect changes, because we all know things change. The only thing that's constant in life is change. So we have to make sure that we have regular reviews and we're updating that information. We have, a lack of roles and responsibilities if we don't communicate, right? And so this is what'll happen. Again, confusion, miscommunication. Without clear roles, employees, they duplicate efforts. I said that earlier. Like these things all intersect and they all overlap. We just have to make sure that we're collaborating, we're communicating, we're making sure that people are accountable, we're doing touch points, whether it's a half-hour meeting once a week or an hour meeting once a week, the same day, the same time, every week. Consistency, right? Consistency helps efficiencies on top of it. So we don't have inefficiencies. We don't want the delays, right? We want to be able to have an impact and be timely and not miss deadlines and have overall productivity go up and not down. And so we got to define these things. We have to know who's going to be the project manager, who's going to be accountable for the implementation, who's going to be testing these things. What clients are we going to leverage? What are we going to ask the clients to do? All of those things in roles and responsibilities when you're doing an implementation. We don't want to cause low employee morale, right? And we will. If we don't have, first of all, leadership buy-in, you have to have buy-in from the top down. If you don't, you will fail again. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with failing. We actually learn more from failing than we do from successes. Because when we just go in and everything's successful, there may be things that didn't work really well, but we'll never know because the project was successful. So I'm not saying that you're going to fail and it's going to be awful and the world's going to come crashing down. I'm saying you need to learn from these things. And that's why I'm sharing the lack of things, the inconsistencies, right? Learn from those things so that you don't have to go through those pain points again. We want to have good, clear direction. Go back to what I said. Be that person, first day on the job, put the hat on and see what it feels like to sit in those shoes by building clear, our 3 Ps, policies, processes, and procedures, laying it out in workflows like financial sense, being able to be collaborative, right? Communicating really, really well. You're able to accomplish a lot and bridge the gap between not having a clear, transparent workflow and having an incredibly great, clear workflow. Transparent, everybody knows where the work is, everybody knows the status of the work, and we're able to work together as a team. There is no I in team. We have to do it together, and everybody wins. So you can get a free trial of Financial Sense, 14 days worth. There it is. They put that in the deck. And thank you, everybody, for attending this session today. I so much appreciate everybody taking time out of their day. I hope you have some really good takeaways, the 3 Ps for sure, and collaboration. And I look forward to meeting everyone in person, maybe at Intuit Connect. You never know. I'll be there. Do we have any questions? I'm looking through. I do not see any questions. So I think we're good to go.
We have one question.
There is one question.
Yeah, from Raquel, and it's on the stage now.
Okay. Would a workflow manager be something to look at? One person monitoring employees' project and task list. I think that's a great idea. And the biggest thing with firms is it's hard to have somebody not be billable, right? To be in an admin role. But sometimes you can take a person that wants to be the subject matter expert in a workflow, like a financial sense, and they can be very beneficial to other individuals and being able to keep folks on track. A director, a manager, great idea. Other questions? Have clear workflows and SOP makes things run so much. Yes. Well, that's not a question. That's an incredibly great statement. I couldn't agree more with you. And I'll tell you what, Shannon, one of the most important things is to make sure that every person reads your SOP and your statement of work prior to starting an engagement, and everybody on the team. That way they know what the expectations are with that client. When they don't, and people go into it blindly, they really run into issues, right? They get confused. So being very transparent again and sharing out those SOPs and the statement of work prior to the engagement commencing. I don't see any other questions coming through, Rachel.
Yeah, that's all the questions in the Q&A box.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody. Enjoy Workflow Con. Thank you for coming to this session. And again, I appreciate it. Bye.